I'm Smedes York, and very interested in history and bringing people into some of the things that happened in the past. And today I wanted to talk about Cameron Village, which my dad was the originator and developer, and a lot of changes have taken place over a pretty long period of time. But we're proud that Cameron Village today is doing so well, and particularly seeing how it has been repositioned, and especially with new apartment projects, over 500 new residential units on Overland Road. So Cameron Village today is at a peak, and so that makes you especially pleased to go back to the beginning and talk about how it originated, and particularly want to talk a little bit about the Cameron Village subway, which has not been reorganized, so to speak. But Cameron Village opened in November of 1949, and there were several other things that happened in November and December of 49, the latter part of 49. That was Reynolds Coliseum opened, and the first Dixie Classic was held. But I want to talk about Cameron Village. My father had joined the Urban Land Institute, which is a national real estate organization, international organization. In fact, I was just up at the ULI meeting in New York last week, but he joined and had met a gentleman by the name of J.C. Nichols, who developed Country Club Plaza in Kansas City. And Mr. Nichols became somewhat of a mentor to my father. And we have a Nichols Drive in Cameron Village, but Cameron Village was laid out in 6 city blocks, which is very similar to how Country Club Plaza is laid out. There were no malls at the time. So it opened in 49. It was very exciting. The original 6 blocks were all planned, as well as over 500 apartments which surrounded us, and over 100 single-family detached homes. So there was a master development, some office buildings and space as well. So it did really well during the 50s, and a number of merchants from downtown moved to Cameron Village. Cameron Village had storefront parking and just a new concept, and a lot of people after the Second World War were moving out of the central part of the city, although Cameron Village is in the central part of the city, but nevertheless, it was part of a movement that sort of away from downtowns. Now, excitingly, downtown has really come back, but that's another story. So anyway, in the 50s, Cameron Village was doing extremely well. In the 60s, really well. North Hills opened in 1964 and was converted to a mall in 67, and then Crabtree opened in 72. So that was, in the 70s, was really the advent of the mall. So Cameron Village had a period where it really wasn't doing that well. It was still generally fully occupied, but people would ask me, how's Cameron Village doing? And I know they were sort of suggesting that perhaps it wasn't doing too well. And then after a number of years and some change in ownership, and with the Dutch pension fund owning it, we were able to reposition it in the late 80s, and people started saying, I love Cameron Village. So excited about that. But I thought I'd spend a few minutes talking about the Cameron Village subway and how that came about. It was an idea that I had along with Hal Worth and Nan Hutchins, and Nan is the person that wrote this book. But we had a department store here by the name of Boylan Pierce. That's B-O-Y-L-A-N Pierce, P-E-A-R-C-E, Boylan Pierce. And they had operated as a department store. And when my father had built that building, he had designed it for a full basement and also for expansion up. It was designed structurally for that. Of course, the full basement had just been there, and Boylan Pierce never expanded, never wanted to expand. They were somewhat successful, but doing just right in the space they had. So we heard about Underground Atlanta. So we took a trip down there, and kind of inspired us, and we came back and came up with a plan to utilize that space, that lower level space. And we needed an anchor tenant, somebody that really would get the attention. And lo and behold, the Frog and Nightgown was operating over on Medlin Drive. And we were able to talk Peter and Robin Ingram into moving into the subway. We designed a wonderful space, and they were the anchor tenant. Beyond that, initially there were not other restaurants or night spots. There were a series of small shops. And we worked with Leaf Valley and Associates, and particularly Nelson Benzing, and he came up with a great plan, we thought, and we had a lot of, as I said, a lot of small shops. And initially the Subway, which opened in, I think, September of '71, the Subway was packed with people, and the shops were doing fairly good, but a lot of people were just sort of looking. So through the years, many of the shops didn't do well, and we needed to have a different focus. So we took a number of the shops and organized them into a different, larger space, and that's where the pier was. So we had the Frog and the Nightgown and the pier. Then the Ingrams opened up another place called Deja Vu. And so for quite a number of years, it was sort of the entertainment center, you might say. And we were very proud of it, but it began to have some problems. It really, the night spots and restaurants, even though they had good business, weren't necessarily very successful. And so there started to be turnover. The Frog and Nightgown really didn't make it. And my dad and I tried everything we could to keep it going. We bought their equipment and leased it back and did whatever we could to keep it going. It was fantastic what happened at the Frog and Nightgown. The number of entertainers that came in, the 4 freshmen, Bette Midler, Barry Manilow, just a number of leading artists of the day. But what happened, when they had those, they could only sell so many seats because it was limited. And then nights that they didn't have the major entertainers, they really weren't thought of as a restaurant. They would always have some type of entertainment. So unfortunately the Frog and Nightgown didn't make it. I think that's where the Bears Den came in, I believe, and there was a number of changes as we went along. But eventually, going back to the Boyle and Pierce space, there was a new owner of the Boyle and Pierce, and we thought maybe they would want to expand down, and the Subway was having a lot of issues, and so during the day there would be all kind of litter, you might say, in the parking lot, and we got a little concerned with so many people, congregating in a space that was essentially underground. It really wasn't a basement per se because it was on the ground level in the back, but and it met the safety requirements. So we just decided to make a transition because we had to continue to try to bring new merchants in, new restaurants, and so it closed. And it's kind of sad. The first act at the Frog and Nightgown was Tiny Tim and Miss Vicky. Miss Vicky didn't attend, but Tiny Tim was there. It was the first performer. So the Village Subway, I think, is a part of Cameron Village history. And now Johnson Lamb, a sporting goods store, has a portion of what was the Subway, and the Fresh Market, which is upstairs, is going to utilize some of the space in the Subway for sort of back of the house type prep areas and that sort of thing, storage, and it'll expand their retail presence upstairs. Could the Subway come back with entertainment? And there's a lot of space left, and a lot of people are interested in it, so stay tuned for that. But just let me finish carrying forward a little bit with Cameron Village. When we did the sort of repositioning in the late 80s and early 90s, we worked with a planner, a fellow named Michael Buckley, with the company Halcyon, and he came up with new ideas. Basically, we ended up taking down parking decks. We took Daniel Street, which was a city street, and were able to privatize it so that we could put the angled parking on both sides. So we had a lot more ground level parking, not as many total parking spaces, but we were able to get it's called a pedestrian overlay district. So we were able to sort of reposition, and we were losing the department stores. Sears had been there, and then Tallheimer's changed into Hex, and that's when Harris Teeter became interested in moving up to that space. And we took where it was J.C. Penney was here, that we subdivided that. It's in the middle block into a number of stores, and of course the Boyle and Pierce is where the Fresh Market went. So all of that repositioning took place, and we again taking the parking decks down and make it much more pedestrian friendly, added more sidewalks along the streets, and made it a lot more comfortable. So now, as I said, it's doing really well. It's actually owned by a major REIT, a Regency. Their top guy here is John Farr. We work very closely with them. We still do the management and leasing. And so we want to continue to have a lot of independent merchants, a lot of fashion stores, restaurants, night spots like we have now where we can have sidewalk dining. So it's really set up well, and it's benefited by the whole sort of urban core movement in the city of Raleigh. So hopefully the next 60 plus years for Cameron Village will be as good as the last 60, and any property has ups and downs, and I guess just to take a quick summary, opened in 49 on a certainly upward trend, and then you came into the 70s where we had some issues. It came down and stayed down for maybe 15 years or so, and then with the repositioning, that really started to work, and then with the whole movement back to the central part of the city, it's working even better. So that's a little bit of a capsule of Cameron Village.